Hello, Adab, Ramadan Mubarak, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, and welcome to tonight's concert featuring the legendary Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and party performing at WOMAD in 1985. My name is Thomas Hodgson and I am the convener of this Sounds of South Asia series brought to you by the Faculty of Music at the University of Oxford. Tonight's concert has been produced in partnership with Real World Records, who have made this unique, immersive listening experience. And we both strongly encourage you to use your favourite pair of headphones to listen to tonight's concert and be transported back to 1985 for this seminal moment in music history. If you would like to learn more about this concert, or indeed the Sounds of South Asia series more generally, please do consider clicking on the links below. The concert will be followed by a Q&A session featuring myself, Dhruv Sangari, Wajiha Naqvi and Dr. Catherine Schofield. We really hope that you will stay tuned and join us for that. And in the meantime, from all of us here at the Faculty of Music, we do hope that you enjoy the show.
रहे।
या खुदा जिस्म में जब तक ये मेरे जान रहे,
तुझ पे सदकी तेरे महबूब पे कुर्बान रहे।
तुझ पे सदके तुझ पे सदके तेरे महबूब पे कुर्बान रहे।
कुछ रहे या न रहे, पर ये दुआ है कि अमीर निदा के वक्त सलामत मेरा ईमान रहे।
कुछ रहे या ना रहे, पर ये दुआ है कि अमीर निदा के वक्त सलामत मेरा ईमान रहे।
तेरी सना तेरी सना
तेरी सना
तेरी सना का खुदा बंदे लायज़ाल है तू। यही मिसाल है तेरी के बेमिसाल है तू। तेरा कमाल ही दुनिया के हर कमाल में है। ये शान तेरी के हर शान में कमाल है तू। अल्लाहू 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 अल्लाहू।
अल्लाहू 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 अल्लाहू
अल्लाहू
अल्लाहू अल्लाहू अल्लाहू अल्लाहू अल्लाहू
जब ना थी ये जहां, जब ना था ये ज़मीं, जब ना थी
ये जहां जब ना था,
चांद सूरज ना थे आसमां,
जब ना था चांद सूरज न थे, आसमां जब ना था,
राज हक भी किसी पर आया जब ना था,
हक भी किसी पर आया जब ना था,
तब न था कुछ यहाँ, तब न था कुछ यहाँ, था मगर तू ही तू।
अल्लाहू 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 अल्लाहू
sa sa da ni da di da sa 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 da di da 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 ga ga ni da da di da da di da da di da di da da di da da di da da di da di da da di da da di da da di da da di sa da di ni da da ga ga ni ga de ma ma ga ba ba ma da da ba di ni da अर्श तक मुस्तफा
पहुंचे मेराज में, अर्श तक मुस्तफा
जब न माबूदो बंदे में पर्दा रहा,
जब ना माबूद बंदे में पर्दा रहा,
एक मलाइक ने हजरत से झुक कर कहा,
तब फना क्यों पिया इब्ने हैदर ने जामे फना
ये खाल खिंचवाई तबरेज ने क्यों भला
खाल खिंचवाई तबरेज ने क्यों भला
तार पर चढ़ के ये तार पर चढ़ के मंसूर ने क्या कहा
तार पर चढ़ के मंसूर ने क्या कहा
ये सपना के खिलौने सपना के खिलौने रहा
तू ही तू अल्लाह 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 अल्लाह
निसा रे सा दिस इज राग मेघ निसा रे मा पा मा रे नी रे सा नी निसा रे मा पा नी मा नी पा मा रे सा नी 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 रे मा पा नी मा नी पा मा रे सा नी पनि सा रे नी रे सा रे नी नी सा रे मा पा नी दा रे Sare dare mama dare mama dare bari bari dare dare sare dare dare mama dare mama dare bari bari dare ni dare ni dare dare mama dare bari bari dare तेरी शान या वहदहू ला इलाहा तेरी शान या वहदहू तू ख्याल हो तजस्सुस तू ही आरज़ू तू ख्याल हो तजस्सुस तू ही आरज़ू आँख की रोशनी दिल की आवाज तू आँख की रोशनी दिल की आवाज तू
अल्लाहु 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 अल्लाहु
This tune is in the rag Bhairavi. अलीमा में मनस्तो मनम गुलाम अली
मनस्तो मनम गुलाम अली
हजार जान गिरा फिदाए नाम अली पेशवाए तमाम रिंदानम के सगे पुए शेरे जजदानम कभी दीवार हिलती है कभी दर कांप जाता है अली का नाम सुनकर अब भी खैबर कांप जाता है शाह मर्दान
शाह मर्दान अली शाह मर्दान अली Ali, 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 Maula 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 Ali.
ए जबले जबले रे मनवा
जबले जबले रे मनवा, जबले जबले रे मनवा, जबले रे मनवा, जबले रे मनवा,
रे मनवा
जबले जबले रे मनवा, जबले रे मनवा, जबले रे मनवा, जबले रे जबले जबले रे मनवा,
यही नाम सच्चा है प्यारे यही नाम सच्चा है प्यारे यही नाम दर्द प्यारे यही नाम तेरे सब दुख टाने इसी नाम की बरकत ने दिया राज हकीकत खोल
तू भी अली अली मौला अली अली मौला अली 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 शाह मर्दान अली
लावताई
अली शेर यज़दान अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली
मौला अली अली मौला अली अली मौला अली अली मौला अली अली
अली अली अली मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक
saga magani saga sa saga gama magaga sa saga gama magaga sa saga gama magaga sa saga gama magaga sa dari riza gaza 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 dari riza gaza gaza saga gama mama 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 saga gama mama mama mama
saga gama ma ma ga
saga mama gama 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 dari 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 dari
saga gama ma ma ga saga gama
पर अली अली हो जुबां पर अली अली
तन पर अली अली हो जुबां पर अली अली
तन पर अली अली हो जुबां पर अली 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 तन पर अली अली हो
पर अली 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 तन पर अली अली हो जुबां पर
अली 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 तन पर अली अली हो जुबां पर अली अली तन पर अली
अली हो जुबां पर अली अली
ये मर जाऊं तो कफन पे भी लिखना अली अली हक
अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली
बगैर हुब्बे अली मुद्दा नहीं मिलता
बगैर हुब्बे अली मुद्दा नहीं मिलता
इबादतों का भी हरगिज़ सिला नहीं मिलता
इबादतों का भी हरगिज़ सिला नहीं मिलता
इबादतों का भी हरगिज़ सिला नहीं मिलता खुदा के बंदे सुनो गौर से खुदा की कसम
खुदा के बंदे सुनो गौर से खुदा की कसम
ये जिसे अली नहीं मिलता खुदा नहीं मिलता
अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक
अली मौला 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 अली
हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली अली मौला अली
दीन है दर की
इबादत है ये फरमान नबी दीन है दर की
इबादत है ये फरमान नबी दीन है दर की
इबादत है ये फरमान नबी
दीन है दर की
सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की सब कर लो दीन है दर की
मामा मदद दिल 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 दे मासा दा दा दिल दिल दे मासा
इबादत है ये फरमान नबी
है अली रूह नबी जिस्म नबी जान नबी है अली
रूह नबी जिस्म नबी जान नबी
गुले ततहीर अली गुले ततहीर
अली
हक शमशीर अली हक शमशीर पीरों का पीर अली अली हक
अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली
उनकी साए में है विलादत की जगह
हर में काबा उनकी साहिब है विलादत की जगह हर में काबा
आंख खोली तो चेहरा मोहम्मद देखा
आंख खोली तो चेहरा है मोहम्मद देखा
नूर तनवीर अली
नूर तनवीर अली
बदले मुनीर अली
बदले मुनीर अली
मालिक तकदीर अली अली
हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली अली हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली 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 मौला अली हक अली 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 मौला अली
This is very famous tune, very famous tune. शाहबाज कलंदर लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला झूले लालन लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला झूले लालन सिंधड़ी दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर ओ लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला झूले लालन सिंधड़ी दा
सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर ओ लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला झूले लालन सिंधड़ी दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर दमादम मस्त कलंदर दमादम मस्त कलंदर दमादम मस्त कलंदर
ओ अली दम दम दे अंदर
अली दम दम दे अंदर हो अली दम दम दे अंदर हो अली दम दम दे अंदर
ओहे लाल
मेरी मत रखियो बला झूले लालन सुंदरी दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर हो लाल मेरी मत रखियो बला झूले लालन दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर लाल मेरी पत रखियो बला झूले लालन सुंदरी दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर लाल मेरी
चार चराग तेरे बलन
हमेशा चार चराग तेरे बलन हमेशा
पंजवा
बालन आए बला झूले लालन हो पंजवा बालन आए बला झूले लालन
सतवा
आई बला झूले लालन ओ सिंधड़ी दा सेवन दा सखी शाहबाज कलंदर बाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर सखी शाहबाज कलंदर समादम मस्त कलंदर हो दमादम मस्त कलंदर हो दमादम मस्त कलंदर हो दमादम मस्त कलंदर
ओ अली दम दम दे अंदर
हो अली दम दम दे अंदर हो अली दम दम दे अंदर
ओ लाल मेरी
पत रखियो बला झूले लालन सुंदरी शाहबाज कलंदर
ये गनन गनन तेरी नौबत बाजे
ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਆਇਆ ਤਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨਿਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਓ ਸਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ
ਜੋ ਦੂਰ ਦੂਰ ਰਹਿ ਕੇ
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਲੰਘਣਾ ਦੂਰ ਦੂਰ ਲੱਗੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਲੰਘਣਾ
ਅਸਾਂ ਦੀਦ ਬਿਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਮੰਗਣਾ
ਆਸਾਂ ਦੀਦ ਬਿਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਮੰਗਣਾ
ਉਹ ਤੇਰੀ ਨਿੱਕਾ ਜੀਆ ਮੰਗਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ
ਆਇਆ ਵੀ ਨਿੱਕਾ ਜੀਆ ਮੰਗਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਤੇ ਨਿੱਕਾ ਜੀਆ ਮੰਗਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਬੀਬਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਮੋੜ ਦੇ ਤੇ ਨਿੱਕਾ
Wow. Well, what an amazing performance that was. I feel speechless, but luckily I'm surrounded by expert practitioners and scholars to help me make sense of that and help us make sense of that performance. My name is Thomas Hodgson. I'm a departmental lecturer in music at the Faculty of Music here in Oxford. And welcome everybody to this Q&A session. I'd like to introduce you first to our panelists, and we're extremely lucky to be joined by Wajiha Naqvi, who is an artist herself. She is a singer, a composer, a songwriter from Karachi in Pakistan, where she is joining us from today. Wajiha ji is trained in the North Indian classical music tradition with Ustad Nusrat Fateh, a Qawwali exponent from the Qawwal Bachon Ka Gharana, who are direct descendants of the disciples of Amir Khusro, who we'll be talking about, I'm sure, in just a moment. And Wajiha was featured in Coke Studio Pakistan season 11 as one of the backing vocalists and as one of the lead female artists for Coke Studio Pakistan in 2020. So welcome, Wajiha ji.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
So we are also joined by Ustad Dhruv Sangari. And Dhruv is a world-renowned Qawwali and classical vocalist who was trained by the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan himself. Dhruv is based in New Delhi in India, and he directs or sings with a number of bands such as Sufi Ensemble, Humble Mystic, Darsars, and V&A. Dhruv has been performing professionally since 2001, and his repertoire includes singing in Farsi, in Arabic, Punjabi, Urdu, and Hindi verses from the works of some of the most famous poets and saints. So welcome, Dhruv. And finally, but by no means least, we are joined by Dr. Catherine Schofield of King's College London. Dr. Schofield is a historian of music and listening in Mughal India and the para-colonial Indian Ocean. Catherine works largely with Persian, Urdu, and visual sources for elite musical culture in North India and the Deccan around 1570 to 1860. But Catherine's general interests lie in South Asian music more broadly, the history of Mughal India, Islam and Sufism, empire and the para-colonial, and the intersecting histories of the emotions, the senses, aesthetics, and the supernatural, all of which, of course, play a large role in how we respond to this music. So let's begin by just quickly going around and getting our immediate responses to what we just heard. Wajiha, hearing that performance, what did it do for you?
Firstly, hello, Assalamu alaikum, adab to everyone, and Ramzan Mubarak, because we're obviously hearing this spectacular performance in this very blessed month of Ramzan for Muslims all over the world. Honestly, I feel so privileged and honored to have witnessed this performance, and it's taken me into this state of hal, something that Sufis often experience when they listen to devotional music, and I think I can say this for everyone who's probably listening, that the great Khan Sahib, when we say Khan Sahib in Pakistan, of course, that's a term of reverence given to Ustads generally, but there is only one the Khan Sahib, which is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahib, when you say Khan Sahib here. So I am just absolutely elated and delighted to have heard this. And of course, one of the main purposes of Qawwali, Qawwali comes from the word qawl, which is called speech and God's word. And so it's instantly brings you closer to the divine, to God, to Allah. And I think that's something that I've immediately felt and experienced. So what a treat to be able to hear and of course experience that binaural sound, that really immersive experience. It was really a pleasure.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this binaural rendering it just does something else that gives the sense of proximity that I thought was really, really stunning. Dhruvji, tell us your immediate reaction to this performance.
Absolutely. Firstly, greetings to all of you. My salams, namaskar, sat sri akal, adab to people listening around the world. In these challenging times, there's also hope, and I think that just like Ramzan, means a purification, a kind of rejuvenation. We've just passed spring, and spring has been the special festival of the Sufi Bhakti saints, of course. And so now maybe God is giving us an indication that perhaps things are going to turn the corner soon. And in these times, it's such a blessing to see that people, I like to use a term a very famous Sufi sheikh uses for the people of, Sama, the people of Irfan, the people of Lutf, the lovers of love. And I think Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab, marhoom, Allah Bakshe, his music always stood for this joy, this love, and whatever language, whatever ethnicity you came from, at the end of it, you were definitely changed. I have a German friend who said, I crashed my car the first time I listened to Khan Sahab. Somebody told me my hair and broke my hip when I listened to Khan Sahab. Um, you know, the so the first story I heard of Khan Sahab before I met him was from a very famous curator in London, who said that, when he used to come for his early concerts, it was the cash and carry guys, who used to organize it for him. And there were all these sort of Indian Pakistani lovers of music, and there were like 40 people in the audience, but the junoon, the passion in his eyes was so visible, and it just makes me very moved even today. So I think that listening to this recording was really brought back all those memories, and the binaural aspect was amazing. Like when you hear Haq Ali Maula, something which I had the good fortune to, be able to render on Coke Studio, albeit just a glimpse, but we heard the whole kalam. Or Allahu, these seminal kalams, and suddenly you get to hear the layering also. So it's not just, of course, if you hear it on a proper set of speakers, you hear the layers, like, the little trill of the second harmonium, or, the little joining in of the voice, and hearing Rahat Bhai, in his unwavering swar, even at that young age, mashallah, is so amazing, brings back so many memories. And Khan Sahab's Anahat Naad, truly the man, the musician who got the closest to that unstruck sound. Wajiha ji, Kaan Roos ke Ruh hai Adam Ahmad Babadan, so literally the divine sound of the origin itself, perhaps, what we musicians like to say, the unstruck sound. Perhaps it was in his improvisation, it was in his gaiki, it was in his ang that we really witnessed that. So it was definitely in all its glory there for us to hear in this beautiful concert, and I'm sure those who have heard it are feeling that vibratory experience, the sonic experience within, and it's really such a blessing. So thank you for doing all this, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much. And Catherine, listening to this as someone who is a scholar of this music, and I'm sure you will have read and heard so much about this concert and its importance. So, listening to it now through this binaural rendering, what did it do for you? How did you respond to it?
Amazing. And adab, salam alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal, and hello to everybody listening. And my heart goes out to all of those who are suffering from COVID at this time, especially in South Asia, where it's really quite terrible at the moment. And you know, I concur with Dhruvji that that, you know, perhaps just listening to this might be a sign, God willing, that the corner is turning. I'm just blown away. So I've been listening to a lot of Nusrat Sab over the last semester, because I teach a course to my undergraduates called Music and Muslim Culture South Asia, and in fact the Maskalanda is actually on my students' exam. It's okay, I'm not giving anything away if they know. They don't know what question I'm going to ask about it, but I mean, I'm struck immediately by two things. First, you know, I'm most familiar with the 1993 recording of Haq Ali Ali, that great manqabat to Hazrat Ali, and listening to this recording just actually completely, because I've not heard it before, and listening to it as if you're there. I mean, really, the intimacy of that binaural recording is amazing. Just kind of opened up new spaces for me of understanding, and I'm really going to sit with this and excuse me, try to work out what's going on there, particularly in the spaces between the notes, between events. I mean, that's really amazing. And I swear, towards the end there, when he switches into other notes of the rag, that there's a jazz standard in there. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it really, you know, there's this kind of gesture to the world there. But the other thing that you know really struck me on a personal level is hearing Little Rahat sing. You know, before his voice is broken, and the tremendous teaching opportunity, that pedagogical lineage coming through there of singing on stage with his uncle, and so beautifully as well, and his little voice, you know, an octave higher, just, you know, sort of matching the rest of the party, and it's personal way, because Rahatji and I are the same age, and we were both 10 turning 11 in 1985. And I also used to sing with my family on stage, country music rather than Qawwali, of course, and nowhere near, you know, certainly not WOMAD level. And my own son is 10 turning 11 at the moment, and just thinking about the kind of gifts that we pass on to our children through music, I found that immensely moving.
That's very, very interesting. You know, just how this music can speak to people across, you know, both time and space is such a big part of what makes it so meaningful. And, you know, it's especially poignant that we have Rahat Fateh Ali Khan singing on this performance, because Rahat Khan Sahab, he is one of the original benefactors of the Sounds of South Asia series that has made this performance, this concert today possible. Yeah. Also interesting. And Wajihaji, you know, could you sort of, I don't know, as a performer in Pakistan today, someone who has grown up, you know, in this environment, can you sort of just tell us perhaps a little bit about how Khan Sahab has informed, you know, your own sort of approach to music, your own approach to performance, and, you know, what it really means to you today?
I mean, Tom, he's such a cultural icon. I mean, global icon, a national symbol for Pakistanis. I mean, he put Pakistani music on the global map, to be honest, and took Qawwali to another level, collaborating with music producers from the West. And, you know, he was, so for me, I think I see him as a real visionary, really far-sighted, ahead of his time, doing fusion music, and really has been the originator of world music, as we now call it. So I think he was a real sort of visionary, and I think that's something that's so bold and brave of him to have taken Qawwali and experimented with music from the West, and having collaborated with so many different styles of music. He was this is always I'm sure Dhruv would be able to respond to this, that sometimes traditional music forms are sometimes not necessarily able to gain that kind of mileage or gain that kind of traction, because in a global world today, you need to be able to evolve, you need to be able to transform the art form in itself, of course retaining a lot of its roots and retaining a lot of its inherent foundations, which is what Qawwali as an art form is it can mold into lots of different types of music. But for someone like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab to have taken it to a completely different level, I think that that's, as a performer, something really inspiring to me. And as someone who's training still training, of course, and still learning Hindustani classical music, I think, there's so much to learn from him. I think I do remember that, of course, because he's such a household name. I do remember growing up to his qawwalis, and the iconic qawwalis that he sung today, that we heard today. They're all something that literally are in our everyday repertoire, and so we have grown up to this poetry and these sounds, and so everyone automatically, we're not separated from our religion is not separated from the art itself, right? The sacred is very much intertwined with our music, with qawwali as it is. And so even in the context of weddings where you'd hear qawwali performances, even if it's situated out of its original religious context, it is still as sacred for a lot of us. And so I think that's something that, as a performer, I really continue to carry. Sufi music is something that cannot be divorced out of its original context, which is being able to connect with the divine. And as a Muslim, I think I really feel that Khan Sahib was able to do that through his music. He was connected to the divine, and that connection, that love, that ishq really just flows through his own rendering.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear, and what is so remarkable about all of that really is that what we've just heard is a particular moment. It's almost like being back at this moment where Khan Sahab was pioneering this music in such interesting ways and bringing it to new audiences, and how subsequently that ishq, that love that you're talking about finds its roots in different contexts, across the world, and how powerful that really is. Dhruv ji, could you sort of regale us perhaps with some stories about your time with the great Khan Sahab, and what he was like, and what that's meant for you as a musician?
So many stories and so many anecdotes. But Khan Sahab, the first time I met Khan Sahab was actually in the University of Washington State, which is in Seattle actually, and he was on the post of artist in residence there. So he was training various people, a lot of them from European American backgrounds, and a lot of other professors, scholars, students were constantly engaging with him. And his time there had nearly come to an end, and when I had met him, he was about to go off on another tour. And by this time, he was not in the best of health, you must understand. So this is like 95, 96, yeah. But I expressed the desire that I said that, Khan Sahab, I am your biggest fan, and I am I have just finished my schooling, and I'd like to come and learn music from you. So Khan Sahab, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab, promptly agreed. He did not have this veneer of any ustad dum in the sense, and this is something which was a constant. Like, he'd be ready and willing for the simplest of engagements to meet with anybody from any section of society. People would come to his place. He would go to different places. He was very active despite his weight, despite his health challenges. And, he was, contrary to what people believe, he was always heavy set, like he was the one of the youngest siblings after several sisters. And, he came into this world when his father was probably much older, probably almost in his 50s. And so there was not much time they had together. And he says that sometimes he feels that was one of the things he would have liked, to spend much more time with his Walid Sahab. Very interestingly, Hazrat Amir Khusro also says that, that hundreds of years ago, he says that when my father, Amir Saifuddin, passed away, I was a very small boy. And although I did not have any time with him, I felt a part of myself went with him. So Nusrat Ali Khan Sahab had two responsibilities. One was, of course, to carry on the lineage, but the other one was also this firm belief, to act upon this firm belief that every form of music, something which he constantly reiterated, needs fresh blood. He used this term. And he says that nothing develops in isolation. So, there are these famous stories of him when he used to go to different countries like Japan or Norway. He used to listen to television, like advertisements, and he used to try and see what kind of music, what kind of notes and scales and modes these societies' ears were attuned to listening. And then he would add that as an improvisation inside his kalam, Khan Sahab was amazing. There's this, he does two things which are very amazing. He uses a device from Indian classical music called Gram and Murchan, kind of shifting of scales to change modes. Where he's done this, twice I've noticed he's done this. He never did this when I listened to one of his concerts live, but I've heard recordings. One is a very seminal recording of J. Vishwadevaji's, at Kufa Art Gallery, with the erstwhile Kufa Art Gallery in London in 1989. And there he's used raga. He's in this Haq Ali Maula Ali, which we just heard. We heard him use Raga Malkons. And, so he uses this device like a Sargam Geet, which is essentially began its journey from Carnatic music, and it came to Punjab via various, and then Mia Shori introduces Tappa to Punjab, and then, suddenly this style gets introduced in that, and then it comes into Qawwali. So that is a completely separate story. However, using of this specific Sargam, which is his signature Sargam, this is something which only he did. However, this usage of whole Swargam Geets inside Qawwalis like Rag Malkos, or shifting the scale, like you take Rag Bhairavi half a note up, and then you do a whole improvisation in Rag Malkos, Rag Marwa, which is an afternoon raga, and then you come back into your, in a sense, the way people use Girah or, Girah Tazmeen, or people use other devices of creating a loop, within the Qawwali and then going somewhere else with it. He used notes to do that. And that's why we were blown away, because then he started incorporating, jazz standards. He started incorporating all kinds of, and people are, I'm sorry to say, very foolish people today. They seem to think the be-all, end-all of Khan Sahab, Rahmatullah Alayh, is just the way he used to have that grain in his voice, this gravelly voice. So we have a whole generation which just tried to copy the voice. They did not seem to understand what was actually happening there, how it was coming from the chest, what was going on, how it was, So when we saw Khan Sahab, we realized that his whole approach was a breath-based approach, right? And you'll see Sham Churasi Gharana or Patiala Gharana. They use this very breathy tans and very breathy approach to music, which makes it so soulful. So Khan Sahab doesn't have that staccato sort of thing which a lot of Qawwalis have become associated with, primarily because Qawwals are no longer trained in classical music. But Khan Sahab was so well trained in classical music that he used these devices like taan, khatka, mudki, phirat. He used to do taranas inside his qawwalis. And so he was reviving something which is Ahange Khusravi, he was reviving something from a long bygone era where the qawwal was essentially also a classically trained musician, who were Shakkar Khan and Makhan Khan, people who, eventually Meeta Pandit ji, L.K. Pandit ji, their gharana, Gwalior gharana, who were all these? They were Qawwal Bache. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab was on one side from the Qawwal Bache gharana, but another whole part of his lineage goes back to training, his ancestors training with Baba Behram Khan also. So Dhrupad was a very big part. So the way he used to divide the beats, Bol Bant, all this stuff was coming from there. So it was a very layered, rich and complex gaiki. And I was already training in classical music with Ustad Iqbal Khan Sahab. So I would appreciate something like this, because somehow people always used to tell me Qawwali is just the province of, dhadis and mirasis, and it's just a folkloristic form of music. But I realized that Qawwali was by itself a fully fledged classical form of music, where the raga was being used in a way which we had never envisaged before. And so I became a lover of Khan Sahab probably at the age of 4, when I used to listen to him on old LPs. And then just imagine, someone like me, I don't come from a gharana, I don't come from anything. I got initiated into a Sufi silsila, I got initiated into learning Indian classical music. Suddenly I'll land up facing one of my greatest heroes. So, my plan was to go to Lahore and just learn from him. So that one year in 1996 in the summer, I did go. And then, I would stay with some friends, and then I would regularly go meet him. He would divide his time between Faisalabad and Lahore, but I would meet him whenever he was there. When he came to India, we went to Gwalior together, where he dazzled everybody singing Khayal, only Khayal Gaiki. And he was getting the Amjad Ali Khan Sahab Award at that time, Lifetime Achievement Award. And I do remember he sang like 10 prakars of Rag Bhairav, and people were like, we've never heard these bandishes before. Similarly, he recounts this story. There's so many stories. I could tell you stories of his love for food, and but I feel that this is the story which is more relevant here, is that he recounted this story in, to not just us, but to every single interview. He says that, I dreamt of Ajmer Sharif. I dreamt of going to Ajmer Sharif and performing there. And then years later, when I came to sing for Rishi Kapoor's wedding, I went to Ajmer Sharif, and then I did this ziyarat, and then I got the other part of the story from my guru, my Piro Murshid, who is in Ajmer Sharif, Dr. Najmul Hasan Chishti. And he said that, I was a young man, and I heard that very, very fat, obese qawwal from Lahore had come. And that I went there because everybody was going there. And when I reached there was a halabaloo, because the khuddam, the caretakers of the shrine, were like, this is not the place where qawwal give their offering, give their hazri. You have to go sit in the proper place for it. And he said, no, this is the place from my dream, the place from my tasawwur. That's where I'm going to sit down and do it. So it was literally near Ahata-e-Noor, where the steps are going down, if you know the sacred geography of Ajmer. And he literally sat on those steps, actually. And he sat down with his brother, Rahat Khan Sahab's father, Ustad Farooq Ali Khan Sahab, and his musicians. And he started performing. And he sang many aqlam, including Tum Ho Jane Ali, Data Hindal Wali. And several thousand people had gathered there. And my Peer Sahab makes a very interesting observation, in man of few words. But he says, to look at him, he was so breathless that we thought, how would a man like this be able to utter a note? But when he started singing, suddenly everything changed, as if he was not of this world. I'll never forget that. So with Khan Sahab, I remember from Gwalior, one very great musician, since everybody has to hear this side of Khan Sahab too, a very great musician, late Ustad Mahmood Dholpuri Sahab, Padma Shri Ustad Mahmood Dholpuri, who was a very fine harmonium player and one of my ustads. He invited Khan Sahab to come to Dholpur They had a dawat at his house, and at this time there was also a film crew there, because this is around the time where he was giving the music for Bandit Queen. So Khan Sahab, had come there briefly, and he had done several concerts in India to packed audiences, in the Pragati Maidan, at the one of the famous hotels in Delhi, where even politicians had no space to sit down. I do remember that was a very amazing setting. Dholpuri Khan Sahab asked the ladies in his home to make a meal, and then when Khan Sahab arrived there, it is said that the meal fell short. What more can I say? And then by the time the film crew arrived, there was nothing left. So Khan Sahab was somebody who used to say that my body is a vehicle, it's just a medium for the the Bani of the saints, the sayings of the Buzurgan-e-Deen. And very similarly, Abida ji also recently made a very amazing remark. She says that I don't see myself as a male or a female, I see myself as just a vehicle for the message. So Khan Sahab, in my opinion, was not just although if you asked him, he said, I'm not a Sufi, I'm just a Qawwali singer. It's Sufis are very big. I'm just somebody who helps them on their journey. But in reality, I would say that whenever I met Khan Sahab, maybe 5 times, because my time with him was very short, but in that, a lifetime, in those 5 times, a lifetime of knowledge was conveyed to me, often silently, and I am still learning. I mean, I'm still learning. Who am I? But what always stays with me is that his presence itself had a spiritual aura to it, which I can't understand till today. Whenever you were close to him, like personally, whenever I was close to him, I got goose pimples, I got goose flesh, thinking that I am in the presence of a very special, very unique, angelic human being, who is literally like perhaps an angel sent down to us to show us what music is, And in summation, I would say that I was once at a concert once in New York. I was listening to a concert of Khan Sahab, an outdoors concert, and one of his last concerts there. And there were some people shouting, and then a voice, heavily accented voice, shouted at them, saying, "Silence! God is singing." So I would say that if I were to ever write something about my time with Khan Sahab, I would say, "Silence, God is singing," because truly that's how we felt. That's how we felt. And I am just those 2 years of my life. I'm just there. I'm still there. So listening to this concert, as I said, brought a lot of that back. So truly, he was a very unique, very soft-spoken person. But when he sang, he became a lion.
Yeah. Wow. Dhruv, thank you so much for those memories and insights. It gives us a real window onto what this great man was like. There was a lot in there, a lot that we could talk about, and I'm quite keen to try and sort of perhaps communicate some of that to some of our audience who might not have heard the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan before, nor perhaps know much about what the shrine context is, and what role qawwals play in this kind of spiritual journey. So Catherine, perhaps we could just turn to you now, just to give us a little bit of that background, the sort of historical depth perhaps to Sufism in this part of the world, and qawwals and their role in kind of mediating this spiritual journey.
Sure, thank you. And Vajihji and Dhruvji, thank you so much for what you said, because I think, together you've actually brought these 2 really important things together. Firstly, the idea of ishq, that Nusratji was he was a vehicle for this passionate love of God, but also that he was embedded in this long history of hereditary musicianship at Sufi shrines, where the qawwals, in fact, throughout the Mughal period, all the way down until the uprising of 1857, were in fact principal classical musicians. They were court musicians as well as shrine musicians. And so for those of you who don't know the context, Sufism and Islam go back a really, really long way in South Asia. The first Muslims came to South Asia very, very shortly after the first years of Islam, in the very early 8th century to Sindh, which is now in Pakistan. And the orders that really fostered the arts that we now call Qawwali, the arts of the Qawwals, stem back to the very early 12th century. So Lal Shahbaz Qalandar, for example, was born in the late 12th century, and Hazrat Moinuddin Chishti settled down in Ajmer Sharif, which of course was not Ajmer Sharif then, it was just Ajmer. It was the seat of the ruler of the region at the time, Prithviraj Chauhan, and he's there before the Muslim conquest, political conquest of Delhi, which happened a year after he came. So Islam came to South Asia peacefully, and then became incredibly rooted in the soil of South Asia. So you have a few successors after Hazrat Moinuddin Chishti in Ajmer. You have the arrival of the great Hazrat Nizamuddin Chishti in Delhi, and many of you will be familiar with his shrine if you've been to Delhi, Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, and he had a great disciple who was a nobleman and a poet, and his name was Amir Khusro, and he's renowned throughout the world as one of India's greatest Persian poets. But he also wrote in local language in what was then known as Hindavi and has now become Hindi and Urdu. And he is known for saying that there is no Turk, there is no Hindu. We're all lovers of the same divine beloved. And those songs that Amir Khusro wrote have been passed down father to son by the Qawwals at Hazrat Nizamuddin and other Chishti and Suhrawardi shrines right across South Asia since the 13th century. Since the 13th century, it's that long that these have been passed on father to son. But what's also really important about them is that, yes, some of them were and sung in Persian modes called maqams, which is where we get ragas like Sarparda from. It was originally a Persian maqam, or Rag Hijaji, which was maqam Hijaz. Or we also get some tals in Hindustani music and in Qawwali, like Sur Fakhta, which comes from Usuli Fakhta, one of the Persian rhythmic cycles. But the great Amir Khusro also wrote in Rag and in Kal, and he wrote these songs in Hindavi. And so you have this full rootedness of the songs of the Qawwals in Raga, which is the basis of classical music. And just to reiterate what Dhruvji said, Qawwals were central to the classical courtly arts of the Mughals and the Rajputs and anybody who hired or wanted to listen to Khayal, because Khayal emerged from Sufi background in the 16th century through the singing of songs of love to Lord Krishna, which was then interpreted as Sufi allegory, but also a great number of khayals written in praise of Hazrat Moinuddin Chishti, Hazrat Nizamuddin, Some of these are still preserved in written texts from the late 18th and early 19th centuries, if anybody's interested in reviving some of these songs, because not only do we have the song texts, we also have the rags and the tals in which they were sung, and in some cases we have sargam. So, you know, they could be reconstructed, these old khayals, which were sung by qawwals. And it's really only in the 18th century that Drupad singers, Kalawans, start to pick up khayal because it's become so popular. And they start singing it as well. All of the progenitors of today's khayal Gharanas, every single one of them was a qawwal. And it is what happened in 1857 when the Indian people, the South Asian people, rose up against the British in what is known as the uprising. And of course the British won, and then they removed the last Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was himself a Sufi, from the throne, and exiled him to Burma, where he died, and is now revered as a Sufi saint. And people sing qawwali at his shrine, and he was a great devotee of the local shrines. But it was only after that qawwals became known far more as shrine musicians, because what you do when everything gets destroyed, and musicians are scattered and murdered, and patrons are scattered and exiled and killed. All Muslims were forced out of Delhi for 5 years after the uprising. So what did they do? They went back to the shrines, which is where their basis was. But they also transformed themselves into the ustads of the emerging lineages that we know today as Gharanas. So that's really important. But the other really important thing is this idea of ishq, this idea of love, that Nusrat Ji is this embodiment and vehicle of love. These two things go together: the great virtuosity he had, the great mastery of the classical traditions, at the same time as this humility to say, I am but a vehicle, I am not a Sufi, I am there to serve those who are on that path, even though clearly, you know, he was himself endowed with that spiritual presence, and we could see that, we can see that, we can still hear that in his voice. But these two things are embodied in this one great concept. I don't think in history there has ever been a qawwal like him. And I've studied the history going right back. And, you know, even the great Sheikh Sher Muhammad of the 17th century, who introduced khayal to Shah Jahan's court, and who was renowned for his khayal singing. I think he would be so proud and so in awe of Nusrat Fateh Khan Sahib, the greatest qawwal.
Wow, thank you, Catherine. I mean, you know, that's so interesting, and what seems to come through so clearly in what you're saying is how qawwali, you know, embodies both kind of this continuity that connects it back to the 13th century, but also, you know, it's adaptability. You know, it adapts to new circumstances, new politics, to new technologies in ways that make it so resonant and meaningful in so many different contexts. And Wajiha, you know, you are in many ways, you know, you've been working in maybe one of the latest iterations of, you know, how qawwal is being heard, you know, across South Asia today. You know, you've been working with Coke Studio, and this is providing, you know, in a way, a different kind of stage, but there is still that kind of dualism of continuity and change. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, about what that is like for you as a performer?
I mean, for me, as someone who, as a performer, borrows stylistically from, of course, South Asian music, but is also borrowing from Western styles of blues music, and trying to kind of create this sort of fusion music. I like I mentioned before, Khan Sahib was leading or paving that way for what a lot of that music now is attributed to Pakistan. So, Pakistan is, in a way has pioneered fusion music of sorts. And so Khan Sahib was leading that way, where as he was categorized as a world music artist. And Coke Studios, of course, has done that and put that on a global scale. It's taken generations of Sufi poetry and qawwali that's been sung for generations and put it in a Western sort of framework of music, of course, because a lot of the instruments, that's another interesting conversation where now qawwali, the way it's performed is also very different from the way it was originally performed, as Catherine has said, but also the harmonium, which is now a central part of qawwali performance, is in itself a Western instrument that was imported into the performance of qawwali, right? So these iterations, this evolution is something that, like you've said, Tom, is something that qawwali has adapted to, and then there are performers that have taken these iterations and have continued to retain the original essence of qawwali, and have adapted to modern sort of styles of music. And I think that's one great way of being able to connect with a broader world today. So, which is why Khan Sahib has been called, like the Pavarotti of the East, or the singing Buddha in Japan, or the voice from the heavens, or voice of paradise. It's not just us as Pakistanis, but because he made that music accessible to people beyond perhaps those that understood the poetry. And I think Coke Studio in some ways has kind of tried to do the same. And it continues to kind of build on that model. And personally, me as a performing artist, as a musician, also attempts to humbly attempts to do the same, because I mean, for me, what was also interesting, I've grown up to a lot of Western music as well. So I was also really fascinated in the way Western musicians like Eddie Vedder and Jeff Buckley, who called him like, he's my Elvis, also the way they revered Khan Sahib. So these kind of, beautiful mixing of cultures is something that qawwali already was. But the way it's evolved in modern music is something that, because it has that capability, it's able to transcend. And in fact, Tom, I'd also like to mention that Khan Sahib's beautiful compilation of songs in this concert as well is something very classic. He starts with Allahu, which is a praise, a hamd to Allah, and then he goes on to Haq Ali Ali, one of the central figures in Sufism, links to Hazrat Ali, Imam Ali, and both revered by Sunnis and Shias. And then going to something very indigenous to the subcontinent, the land of Sindh, of Hind, Lal Shabazz Qalandar from Sevan Sharif, who himself was actually from Afghanistan. And a lot of the Sufi saints, they all came from different parts of the region. Not all were indigenous, but somehow were able to spread their message of love, of Islam, through love, through qawwali, through their poetry, and through their spoken word. So I think that in itself is also something that I found really fascinating in this concert.
Thank you, Wajiha. That's so interesting. These discussions, I just looked at the clock, and it's gone in an absolute blink of an eye, and we could probably talk about this for hours more to come. But I just think maybe it's just a sort of last word. We could go to Dhruv, and perhaps you could just sort of sum up in a way, where this leads us today in terms of your own kind of performance practice, and how you sort of how you were sort of continuing in a way this legacy of the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan.
Thank you all. It's been very enriching, and who am I to say the last word? The great Khan, as my friend from Morocco always calls him. He says the world is divided into two kinds of people: one who have listened to the great Khan, and the ones who haven't. There was another very famous Indian journalist. I think it was Hassan Surur Saab who said that there was a noble. There are two great Khans. One was Genghis Khan, who calls himself the scourge of God, and the other one was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who was a noble conqueror who conquered everybody with just his voice and a smile. Uh,
Wow, wow, wow.
and mashallah, look at the breadth of the repertoire. Professor Sahiba and Wajiha ji and all of you will appreciate this, that हमारे यहाँ तहजीब है गंगो जमन, there is a Hazrat Amir Khusro, what you mentioned, he says, Turke Hindustaniyam man Hindavi goyam cho ab shakkare Misri nadaram che Arab goyam sukhan ke Arab goyam sukhan. I'm an Indian Turk. I'm a Turk of India. So both the heritage of India and Turkey are mine. If you talk to me, I will answer in the language of Hindustani. I will speak to you in Hindi, like flowing water. So if you desire to listen to Arabic, then you must go to Misr, to Egypt. So and of course a play on the Misr, because Misri is also these little cubes of sugar which are. So, but look at this repertoire, this whole Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, this syncretic tradition, this blending of the antinomian with the classical, yet this desire to debate, to have arguments, to transgress, to excel oneself. This is something so quintessential to Indian heritage. He begins with Allahu Allahu. Allahu, very few people know who wrote this. There are many versions of Allahu Allahu, but his version was actually written by a South African Sabri Chishti Sufi known as Dr. Safi Siddiqui. And it was written for him when he was touring South Africa. So he composed it there and he sung it, and people loved it so much that then it became one of his most iconic songs, Hamde Bari Ta'ala, an ode to the Creator. And then we see Haidriyam Kalandaram Mastam, people attribute this to Maulana, some attribute it to some other poets, but he begins with his qata and he goes into Haq Ali Ali Maula Ali Ali. This is written by Janab Saim Chishti, Allama Saim Chishti, very famous Sufi poet who wrote in Punjabi, Farsi, Urdu. And his son, I remember, reached out to me saying, we heard your version on Coke Studio, and I was like, it was nothing. It was just a smash and hack job. I mean, it was just a little my little ode to Khan Sahab. And he was like, well, you'd like to know that we listen to this every day in our Khanka, So I was like, what more praise could someone as useless and pointless as me could ask for? And then we see in this he is speaking. The whole song is dedicated to Hazrat Ali, and he's using poetry from ranging from Hazrat Shah Niyaz to so many different Sufis inside that. And then we come to this anthem of the Qalandars, the antinomian Qalandar. Nobody knows who wrote this song, and but we know that there was a gentleman from Karachi who actually composed it. And he died in penury, of course, but Nusrat
Ashiq Hussain Saab,
Master Ashiq Hussain, and Nusrat Khan Saab really lives that version, because again look at what the Qalandar is invoking. At one level it's invoking Jhulelal, and Jhulelal, just like Hazrat Khizr alayhi salam, or Varuna Deva in the Vedas, he's got this, his fish is his vehicle, and he is the Sindhi sort of river god. At the other level, it's invoking Hazrat Ali, who is he is known as Sirre Sara Ila Ila, as Maulana Rumi says, the knower of the secrets, and Nukta-e Pae Bismillah, the little dot below the B of Bismillah. So Hazrat Ali is so important in a mystical way to all the Sufi lineages. And so we have here a confluence of Hinduism and Islam. We see that Sayyid Usman Marwandi or Hazrat Lal Shahbaz is beloved by both communities. And this song is a testimony to that. So it's got this amazing timelessness to it. That whole thing, what Professor Thomas mentioned about space and time. So look at, this is what the Qawwal is. The Qawwal is an interpreter of this. And I feel I'm so blessed to come from have come from somewhere and then become a part of this tradition, because I am keeping alive the message of harmony, of diversity, of tolerance, of love, and of the essential universalism of the idea of the divine. And that is what the Qawwal is always pointing. The Qawwali is always pointing back to, and that is why we see when that message strikes deep, people go into ecstasy. They just go into these ecstatic states which they sometimes, like Khwaja Qutubuddin, never emerge from. So I think the Qawwali tradition is the most profound form of musical expression, both spiritual and secular, to come from South Asia. And I would say that I am very lucky that I learned this, and I am very lucky I met Khan Sahab, and I got some guidance from him. And I feel that if I can do even 1% of what he did, then I think the world will be better off for it, perhaps.
Thank you, Dhruvji. That's an impressive last words, and that's a useful way to kind of tie together a lot of the threads that we've been talking about today, and what, of course, what we heard in the concert. Wow. Okay. Well, before we, thank all our panelists for joining us today, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and listening to this Sounds of South Asia concert, which is a concert series convened by the Faculty of Music at the University of Oxford, and it's there really to promote concerts and educational workshops and lectures on music from South Asia. And this series began following a generous donation from Ustad Nusrat Fateh, who we've mentioned today and who we, of course, heard in today's concert. And this donation was made back in 2017 following a concert that Rahat performed in the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford. All of these concerts and these workshops are made possible by donations from the public. So if you enjoyed today's concert and would like to see more, then please do consider a small donation by clicking on the link below. I'm really pleased to say as well that this concert that was made possible for us by Real World Records is going to be available for 24 hours after this particular broadcast. So please, do make the most of this time. Listen to it again when the sun sets, and you can immerse yourself once more in this musical world. Because after this, you'll be back to just normal stereo recordings. So please do make the most of this wonderful recording. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I'd like to thank Real World Records and Ollie Jacobs in particular for producing this binaural mix. York Tillier for the wonderful visuals that we have seen, and D&B Audio Technic and Usha Rajan. But finally, I'd like to really thank our wonderful panelists for this fantastic discussion. Dr. Catherine Schofield, Wajiha Naqvi, and Dhruv Sangari. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your insights have just magnified what I heard, and I'm sure the same could be said for everyone listening today. So thank you all very, very much, and I hope you'll be able to join us for future events. Okay, thanks all for watching, and see you soon. And finally, a very big Ramadan Mubarak from all of us here and from the Faculty of Music at Oxford. Pia Malinge.